Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Kia ora, Bolt fam. It's the director. Chargers fans, I'm in a good mood today, man. We got live NFL football tonight in the first preseason game. Of course, it's not the Chargers who will be playing this weekend versus the Los Angeles Rams. Of course, we should be having our live reaction stream going. It's going to be a good time watching all of these, depth pieces and players fight for a roster spot. And in that light and on that topic, I wanted to get in just under the deadline my take 2 of the Chargers 53-man roster prediction, because this year in particular is tough, right? The Chargers' depth this year, I would say, is of higher quality than what I've seen as a fan in a very long time. And with that, you're going to see a lot of talented players fighting for a spot on this team where only 53 will be selected. And of course, like we always do in these prediction videos, we're going to have some fun graphics along the way, try to explain pretty much every single position and some of the choices that I made. And then of course, here in the next couple of weeks, we'll see how close we came in terms of predictions to what ended up happening in reality. It should be a pretty fun time. So in the comment section below, please feel free to follow along as we go over every single position, all the decisions that we made, as well as answering this question in the comments like we always do. And it's going to be a pretty simple one. Who is the most shocking player do you think the Chargers may end up cutting this year? I got a couple of them in mind for my video as well. You can go ahead and add and elaborate to them, but at the same time, I do think it's pretty cut and dry so far in terms of the highest candidates, at least in my mind. So you guys let me know. Before we do kick off, guys, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. The small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this one. Lights, camera, action. Your Chargers 53-man roster prediction, take 2. Of course, you guys will remember several weeks ago we put out take 1, and this one is going to look just a little bit different in terms of some of the names. I would say maybe a little bit more dramatically on defense. The offense has seen a lot of movement as well, but it's very interesting to see how things are shaking out. There are also a lot of really good players in terms of depth. I would say for the offensive line, a couple nice receivers, running backs as well, that are going to put up a fight that may end up giving us a different result by the time we do see the final roster here. So let's start things off by turning off the cam for a second. You guys get a nice full screen look at what we're thinking as far as the offense before we elaborate. Kind of cool, kind of neat. We'll probably end up posting these on Instagram as well, so you guys have something to reference, maybe even post on Twitter to share along. But either way, let's start with the offense and the offensive line. A very, very hot topic this last offseason in terms of especially on the right tackle. But let's go left to right on the offensive line, just kind of refresh a little bit. Of course, a lot of these aren't going to be too surprising. We've got Rashawn Slater, Storm Norton under him. When you see a name in orange, it means that they're kind of playing 2 positions, so just count that player as 1. Rashawn Slater at left tackle, one of the best left tackles in the league. He may end up grading out as one of the top 3 left tackles by season's end. Chargers got very, very lucky in selecting him last season. He's going to be just fine, just as good as ever. Next, we got Matt Filer at left guard, backed up by Jamari Sawyer. Now, what we've seen in camp, Brandon Staley's been absolutely, ecstatic to see Matt Filer come back and really remind everybody how good he is. And then additionally, Jamari Sawyer, him and the other rookie guard that we're going to mention here in just a moment have definitely been turning heads. And Jamari Sawyer is one of those guys that we did expect to maybe flash a little bit in camp because of how much of a steal he was in the draft. So some nice depth there, nice starters to start the line on the left side. Then we get to the middle here with Corey Linsley, backed up by Will Clapp, the former Saint, now Charger, best name in the NFL, Will Clapp. Corey Linsley, of course, is going to be one of the best centers in the league once again. Not much to worry about there or elaborate on there. He's going to be great. These other guys, Matt Filer, Zion Johnson, they're going to be elevated by playing playing next to Corey Linsley. His communication throughout the line, I think, is something that was very underrated last season. That's going to continue on this year to help the Chargers all stay on the same page. As for Will Clapp, he's a guard center hybrid, and it's really nice to see players on the offensive line that can play at multiple positions because it just adds a little bit more flexibility. And then finally, we got Zion Johnson and Brendan Hymas at right guard. Zion Johnson, so far, we've heard a lot of really good things that are reminiscent of the situation with Rashawn Slater last season. He's starting to flash big time, and you know what? He may end up having a similar narrative to the Chargers stud last year in terms of what he can add in his rookie season. Zion Johnson so far looking like the real deal, backed up by Brendan Hymas, who of course a lot of people know I'm high on, but at worst he looks like a pretty solid backup on this line. And then lastly, we're going to get to the shaky spot on this line, which again is kind of tough to say because, you know, the weakest link, right? That's your biggest weakness there. And the right tackle, as of right now, I don't know if the needle's been moved too much in terms of who's going to be winning the starting job, the improvement that we've seen at the right tackle position. Of course, we have seen some. Trey Pipkins taking some time in the offseason to train with Rashawn Slater, and a very reputable trainer in terms of trying to, you know, help his progress coming back in, fighting for that starting position. But as of right now, just kind of off the cuff, I got to say that the battle at right tackle between Trey and Storm seems a little bit stagnant, right? They kind of seem pretty evenly matched and not too spectacular in terms of their flashes. I would hope to see a little bit more as we get into the preseason. Of course, when you're battle tested versus other teams, it's going to reveal just a little bit more. But as of right now, there really is not much to report on. We're hoping that, you know, whoever wins the starting job will be capable at least giving an average performance this season. But right now, if there is one question mark on the roster, right tackle continues to be the biggest one. Next, let's go ahead and move to your quarterback and Justin Herbert, one of the first developments here on the roster that may be a little bit different than seasons past. We've got Justin Herbert, of course, no explanation needed. Chase Daniel, and no Easton Stick, unfortunately. Now, I do think the Chargers at this point should really consider rostering just two quarterbacks because, again, Easton Stick, I would love to see him on the roster. Chase Daniel, great mentor for the Justin Herbert and the Chargers in general. You could kind of like swap them out if you wanted to in this roster. If you want to keep Easton Stick, you want to keep Chase Daniel. Either way, as a backup quarterback, they need to be able to offer something from the sideline. If something were to happen where they need to start, I don't know if the Chargers offense is going to look that good anyway, despite whoever's in there. Right now, to me, Chase Daniel does offer the mentorship on the sideline, I suppose, that could help Justin Herbert throughout the season. Outside of that, you really need to start figuring out where you want to cut down in terms of number of players at each position. I think quarterback rostering two might be a good start this year because you're going to need a little bit more extra help, especially on defense in terms of depth. So we're going to go ahead and go with two quarterbacks there. Next up, let's move to the running backs and fullback. We got Austin Eckler, Isaiah Spiller, Joshua Kelly, and then Xander Horvath at fullback. Now, Austin Eckler, of course, your studded, superstar running back. He's absolutely fine. Then Isaiah Spiller, of course, I think has been snagging that running back two position throughout the entire offseason. Joshua Kelly is probably one of the biggest shocks to me in terms of things I've changed my mind on since the last take. He was a very strong cut candidate for me. I've always felt that he's had some nice flashes, showed some good things in camp, but really when it came to game day, some of his, we'll say, turnovers, fumbles really cost the Chargers big. I'm hoping that he's improved vastly in those terms, but outside of that, in camp, he's been having a pretty spectacular offseason, and this again is kind of another shift from last year where I feel the Chargers may end up only rostering three running backs because you can make a case of putting a Larry Roundtree and a Letty Brown on the practice squad and calling on them if you need to, but as for a roster spot, I think these three are very strong because you're going to see a nice and healthy mixture between Eckler, Isaiah Spiller, and now in my opinion Xander Horvath, who we're going to cover next here. He and Gabe Neighbors at the top of the season were pitted against one another in terms of fighting for that fullback spot. At this point, it really does feel like, from what we've seen in training camp, from what we've seen in the scrimmage especially, that Xander Horvath has taken a sizable lead, and I do expect him to be the starting fullback this season. Not to mention, it does seem that Joe Lombardi wants to get him a little bit more involved in the run game and, lend his spectacular speed, his spectacular abilities from the fullback position in other aspects of the offense. And lastly, to wrap up the offense, we have the wide receivers and the tight ends. We'll start here with the wide receivers: Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, Mike Williams, DeAndre Carter, and Jalen Guyton. Now, of course, I think the biggest story from the wide receivers is the breakout, at least camp star performance from DeAndre Carter, who's looking a lot more like a wide receiver that can contribute this year on offense than just a guy that's going to help us in the return game and on special teams. I think the biggest shocking element of the wide receiver position here is him overtaking the wide receiver 4 position from Jalen Guyton. And I think you can read that a couple of different ways, right? DeAndre Carter has looked spectacular. I think he's definitely going to be involved. Maybe one of those guys that gets involved in more trick plays too. We know Joe Lombardi loves his screens. But at the same time, he is our returner, and I do think that Jalen Guyton and DeAndre Carter may end up sharing a lot of snaps at wide receiver 4 to add that speed element to the offense. Because again, DeAndre Carter, you want to make sure that his talents are available in the return game as well, where he does perform quite spectacularly. Outside of that, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, you know what you're going to get from them. I think Mike Williams is going to take more reps as the Chargers' ex-receiver. Of course, we got him here on the other side. But I do think Keenan Allen sees more snaps in the slot, and then Josh Palmer, where Mike Williams is now slated to. And Palmer's been having a fantastic camp. I think he is one of the best Chargers breakout candidates on offense for the 2022 season. To wrap up offense, we got Gerald Everett, Donald Parham, Trey McKinney. Not much to report on here. Gerald Everett looks fantastic. Of course, the Chargers paid him the big bucks. They want him to be the tight end one. But Donald Parham, I have to say, has been having, I think, one of those standout performances in camp this season, too. He's going to get involved in some way, shape, or form. It seems like Justin Herbert, in the second year of the Joe Lombardi scheme and offense, is starting to maybe pay a little bit more attention to matchups. Mike Williams, Donald Parham, these guys versus maybe shorter DBs. We've seen a lot more targets to them that have resulted in some big plays, and I think Donald Parham is definitely going to get involved. And then lastly, Trey McKinney, who might be more of your blocking tight end there for depth. So there's your offense. A few less bodies than we've seen in years past, but it's because I think the Chargers are definitely going to need a little bit of extra help on this defense, which is quite honestly complicated when you compare it to other defenses in the NFL and may have more moving pieces. But the offense right now looking very strong, very reminiscent of the top 5 offense that we saw last year in the personnel that they had. They should be just fine. Now let's move on to the defense, which in my opinion has the most in terms of moving pieces. We'll start things off by turning off the cam here, getting a nice look at the defensive pieces that we've assembled. Looks pretty nice at first glance. So let's start elaborating here, starting with, let's go from bottom to top this time, in the defensive line. Because the defensive line, the biggest story there you're going to see is involving Jerry Tillery, who we have bumped down to your backup defensive end in a 3-4 system. Your starting 3 are going to be Morgan Fox, Sebastian Joseph and Austin Johnson. In my mind, from what we've heard and what we've seen in camp, Jerry Tillery, as much as his pedigree as a first-round selection may carry him, I just think the performance we've been seeing from these other guys has been so much better. Morgan Fox may be a little quieter than we were hoping to see in training camp, but I do think that his history and his success with Brandon Staley in the past should help him leap over Jerry Tillery quite easily. Sebastian Joseph, I was kind of wondering in our last take whether he'd be playing more at the end spot or nose tackle. It feels like he's been getting more reps at nose tackle, and Corey Linsley himself did state he was one of the best nose tackles he's played against in his 8-year career, which is pretty exciting. And then Austin Johnson looking pretty good. These starting 3 should be very nice versus the run. Morgan Fox may be the one kind of weak link there, but all 3 do offer a lot in terms of pass rush from the interior as well. Then taking a look at a little bit of the depth there, of course, Jerry Tillery getting bumped down. Of all the names here, of course, rostering 6, a little bit higher than years past. Of all the guys here, it feels like Jerry Tillery's spot is in the most jeopardy. The one big missing name that I have from this roster right now, which was re-signed this offseason, so the Chargers may be inclined to keep him on the team, is Christian Covington. In my mind, if Jerry Tillery doesn't show some vast improvement over the next couple of weeks during preseason, his roster spot could be forfeited to a Christian Covington that could immediately step in and offer maybe a little bit more value versus the run. Either way, these are the guys that I've got in there. Brandon Fayoko has been having a fantastic camp as well. He's been leveling up in terms of what he can offer as a rusher from the inside too, which is kind of crazy. He already has very nice skills in terms of run stopping. And then Tito Agbonia, definitely looking nice as a rookie. He's got some more time to develop, but of course I do think he has a leg up on staying on the roster. Next up, let's take a look at some of the edge rushers here that we decided to select. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack. Jamal Davis, I feel, is going to win the spot there as the backup edge behind Khalil Mack. And then Chris Rumph, of course, who's seeing some improvement nicely here in camp in year 2. Of course, you're going to see some pretty nice things from the starting two in Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa. Probably one of the, if not the deadliest duo in the league when it comes to rushing after the quarterback. They're going to look just fine. As far as the narrative behind them, it kind of does start meshing in with the linebacker position, which we're going to get into next. Kyle Van Noy, again, listed in orange, is going to be listed behind both of these guys. And it's because I do think Kyle Van Noy was added with in mind of him playing a little bit of backup edge if he does need to rotate in there. He does have quite the nice skill set. And we have seen mainly him participate from the inside linebacker position this offseason. But I do think it's because of the scarcity of some of the guys that are missing. Of course, Kenneth Murray being the biggest one. But as of right now, it feels like they wanted to get him reps at inside linebacker because we already kind of know what he offers at edge. They wanted to get him pretty synced in there at linebacker to contribute where he's most needed, at least right now. So there's your edge, there's your defensive line. Let's dig a little bit deeper into linebacker. We've got Kyle Van Noy, Drew Tranquill, Kenneth Murray, Troy Reeder, Nick Niemann, and Damon Lloyd, which again kind of gives us a shocking number when it comes to the linebacker position. The Chargers this season, they're not going to be utilizing as many linebackers, correct? Yes, that's absolutely correct. The Chargers want to implement as many defensive backs on the field as possible. I would say about 80% of the time. So why roster so many linebackers, you may ask? Well, that's a good question. For one, you got to take into consideration Kyle Van Noy is going to be playing maybe a bit of a hybrid role, right? So maybe you can say he's like 0.5 of a linebacker that you can add to that spot. But outside of that, the biggest reason why I wanted to add an additional name was because Damon Lloyd's been having a fantastic camp. He looks to be a quality depth piece to this team, which can offer a lot in special teams as well. But you also have to stack on top of that the health concerns we have in some of the starting guys on the roster, right? Drew Tranquill, up and down in his injury history throughout the years with the Bolts, as good as he may be, which he really is, being available is a bit of a risk when it comes to evaluating what number 49 brings to the table. And then, of course, Kenneth Murray, who is currently injured and recovering from surgery not too long ago. It does seem that he's going to be ready by the start of the season, but right now, again, we don't have any confirmation in that. So in order to kind of patch that a little bit and address that a little bit, I decided to add an extra linebacker just to better cover your bases with the starting three not being as stable as other teams in the NFL. And Damon Lloyd, in my opinion, when it comes to the free agent acquisitions, I think he stands one of the best chances on the roster right now to actually make the team. And we're going to represent him just as such by adding him here in this roster prediction take 2. Next up, let's get into the DBs, which may end up being one of the strongest points on this team, which is kind of really saying something, right, dudes? We got Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, a very strong defensive line. It's hard to beat that out, but these defensive backs have been performing spectacularly, even in the absence of Derwin James, who the Chargers are still sorting out a contract situation with. I do expect that to happen any day now. Taking longer than we'd hoped, but there's a lot of theories as to why it's been taking this long. I'm actually still not that worried. Maybe in a couple of weeks I would be, but right now I do still firmly believe Derwin's going to be a Charger for a very long time. We'll start here with the safeties. Nasir Adderley, Derwin James, JT Woods, Alohi Gilman, Mark Webb, and Dean Leonard, which again listed in orange. Nasir Adderley's been one of those players that's really been standing out in camp as a playmaker, a level up kind of guy. What is it going to be now? 4, coming into a very, very nice season, a contract year in which Nasir Adderley really has been proving a lot of the things that we saw in him when we drafted him. He's got the big playability, the ball skills, the positioning, the speed, and it feels like, I don't know if it's in the absence of Derwin James and him taking a leadership role or stepping up, it feels like his pace of play has really taken on another level, right? Another speed. And it feels like in terms of making an impact, Nasir Adderley really has admirably been shining at the safety position, and I think he's going to have a spectacular year as he awaits a contract extension next season with the Chargers. Behind him, you got JT Woods, the rookie, who is kind of, slowly ramping up in camp. Maybe, we had seen a little bit of concerns in terms of coverage, but his speed, his physical stature, and his improvement has been quite evident over the last couple of days, and I do think the Chargers might sprinkle him in here and there. And then lastly, at free safety, we got Mark Webb, who's been one of those, again, you can say like maybe Camp Stars, Camp Stars' little brothers, right? Mark Webb has looked fantastic, and it's a player that Brandon Staley has been especially excited to talk about when it comes to his pressers. Webb, again, is one of those hybrid dudes. He's been playing a lot of nickel. He's been playing a lot of what they'll call money. That's your safety linebacker hybrid, playing closer to the line of scrimmage, which I'll say is something that we've seen a lot from these safeties in training camp, and that's something that I think Brandon Staley wants to implement a lot this season. Mark Webb, again, another one of those guys that has the ball skills. He's got the position. He's got the size. He's got the speed. There's an archetype that Brandon Staley's been going after, and so far so good. Mark Webb has definitely been shining in camp, and there's no doubt in my mind that he makes the roster. We're just kind of waiting to hear on his injury status as he's not been practicing here the last couple of days. Next up, we got Derwin James, Alohi Gilman, Dean Leonard. Derwin James, of course, we're waiting to see on. It's absolutely insane to me how good this defense has been, even without Derwin James on the field. Once he returns, this defense could certainly go nuclear. Like, it's absolutely insane to me how good they've been. And of course, Derwin has been involved. He's been very involved in the walkthroughs, coaching, as a matter of fact, walking through these players and helping them improve this season, even without practicing himself, which is very admirable and, of course, very exciting to see with a guy that you're hoping to get back on the team very, very soon to participate. So Derwin James, we know what he's going to offer. He's going to be one of the best pieces of this defense this year, one of the most important players on the Chargers as a whole. Behind him, we do have Alohi Gilman, which for a while was a cut candidate for me, maybe one of the more surprising ones, because he has been very serviceable and a very nice backup to Derwin James for a few years now. In the end, I decided that since the Chargers want to implement more DBs on the field, guys that they can play closer to the line of scrimmage, I think depth at DB is very important, hence why we're going to be rostering, we'll say 5 safeties on this team, because you are going to see a lot of them playing different roles with this team. Again, you could see Nasir Adderley, Derwin James up top, with maybe a JT Woods or Mark Webb playing in the box or even in the slot. You're going to want as many bodies in there as possible that can play at a high level, and so far, so good, right? And to have that kind of depth in a system that Brandon Staley wants to build is very important, which is why you're seeing a lot more in terms of names and bodies and players for your backups on defense than you're seeing on offense. To wrap up the defense, we got Bryce Callahan, J.C. Jackson, and Asante Samuel Jr. At the cornerback position. Of course, your outside guys are going to be JC and Asante. They've looked absolutely fantastic. JC's been one of those guys that you're worried coming from the New England Patriots system. Is he going to be able to translate? Is he going to be able to keep it up and really prove that he's one of the best in the league? And so far in camp, he is just as advertised. JC is going to make a huge impact for this team. And again, he's been really showing off in camp a little bit with some of his big plays. Asante Samuel Jr. has, coming back from injury, has definitely been showing a lot of upside in terms of his ability to take away the ball and play really nice in man and zone. And of course, Bryce Callahan, one of those guys that the Chargers signed late in terms of free agency. Some of us maybe were so excited about, Khalil Mack, JC, Sebastian Joseph Day, that Bryce maybe fell under the radar, especially because Bryce has been struggling with injury for just so long. He's been looking so good in camp, man. Despite his size, he's been playing up against some of the biggest targets on this team. Mike Williams, Donald Parham, I would say mainly. And despite his size, he's been putting up some big plays and showing that he still is one of the best slot corners in the league so long as he can stay on the field. So the Chargers starting three, very, very strong. Then comes the depth, which, again, very difficult because of how much good play we've seen from some of the depth position players here. Jasir Taylor, Michael Davis, Dean Leonard, I'm going to say are the guys that definitely step up and grab a roster spot this season. I think Dean Leonard has really been shining this offseason, surprisingly being added to the Chargers, we'll say unofficial depth chart a couple of days ago as a safety, which, of course, a lot of these guys are going to be moving around the field, playing up top, down low, wherever in this system. But I decided to list him as, you know, your hybrid guy, a depth corner as well as a depth safety because of his size, his speed, and the way that he plays. All of these guys have been looking fantastic. Jasir Taylor had a fantastic day in camp yesterday, picking off, I think, Justin Herbert, touchdown, etc. He's been looking great. And, of course, Michael Davis being one of the best depth cornerbacks that you could have on any team. Sure, he's been struggling a little bit, but in terms of his play as cornerback 4, it's a very, very, we'll say, luxurious position to have a player like Michael Davis in. And having all of these guys together individually, every single player on this team that is photographed or whatever, individually, very, very nice looking roster. But when you put them together and you put them in the system that Brandon Staley is implementing, it's kind of crazy to see the kind of synergy that's been created in camp so far. Mack and Bosa creating havoc. Joseph Day, Johnson, Fox, Fayoko, these guys creating a much better run defense while also generating pressure from the middle. Kyle Van Noy has been a shining star from the inside linebacker position, even with Tranquil and Murray out. It's very nice to see Kyle Van Noy out there, who was graded as one of the best coverage linebackers last season. The Chargers definitely going to need him this year if that middle linebacker position continues to be a little bit shaky. And then, of course, the defensive backs, which, again, may end up being the strength of this defense, the biggest strength of this defense, which is really shocking when you take a look at the rest of the talent out here. They're going to look absolutely fantastic. If anything, what I'm predicting is that the Chargers defense really holds their own in terms of improving versus the run, getting out there in coverage, but most importantly, I say the Chargers turnover ratio is about to see a big shot in the arm, right? The Chargers are going to get the ball back a lot more frequently for Justin Herbert, and it feels like that was one of the biggest goals of Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco when going out there and really overhauling this defense over one off season. So there's your defense. Long explanation there, I know, but I think, again, in this system, which is a lot more complicated, in this scheme, you're going to need more backups. You're going to need more guys that you can rotate in and out because of how different this defense is going to be operated. And it's very unique, a very difficult defense to grasp, but this Chargers defense has absolutely been taking it by the reins and really fulfilling Brandon Staley's vision as far as I'm concerned. To wrap up this video, got 3 names on special teams as to note. Josh Harris, your long snapper, who's been looking fantastic. Of course, he was cited as the best long snapper in the NFL. He's going to look great. How much he adds, I don't know. I'm not a long snapper expert, but he's been doing great. Dustin Hopkins, great season last year. He's coming back with the Bolts. And then J.K. Scott, who's been showing a lot of promise in camp as an upgrade at punter as well. He's been looking very good. Not listed here, of course, you do have your returner in Deandre Carter, who is going to look very nice as well. I would say he's going to replicate very closely what we saw from Andre Roberts last season, while also offering a lot of value in terms of as a receiver on the offense too. So there is your Chargers 53-man roster prediction. Again, I'm going to turn off the camera here so you guys can, take your screenshots if you want to, save it on there, reference it back once we do get the official word. But a kind of a broad note to make in terms of my roster predictions right now. It is kind of staggering to see how many more players we have on defense in terms of depth than we do offense. But that is because of, I would say, some of the position uniqueness in terms of linebacker, in terms of defensive line, and some of these players playing multiple positions. I think, again, you wrap that up with the complexity of the defense that Brandon Staley is running. Having a lot of guys here is definitely going to help. The Chargers offense more or less looks the same, which is very, very nice considering they were so good last year. it really does feel like the defense has just caught up, and this should result in a very balanced season for the Chargers, which gives Justin Herbert a lot of opportunities on offense while also keeping the score low enough for the defense to really make an effect there as well. The special teams should look a little bit improved as well. That's probably the one unit to keep an eye on, to hope they upgrade over this season, because the Chargers special teams equally as important. But either way, the roster's looking very, very nice. So in the comment section below, let me know your guys' maybe most shocking cut that you anticipate for this season. Let me know what you think of the 53 that I've selected here. Are there too many on defense? Do we need more on offense? Are there some guys in camp that you think are going to earn a roster spot that we didn't list here? Let me know. Either way, Chargers preseason week 1 game coming up this weekend. So excited to see a lot of these guys in action. Maybe some performances do change what we see in this prediction going forward. It's very fun to anticipate how much better this team has gotten, not only on the surface, but throughout depth as well. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you liked what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you guys next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Look out, guys, and look out, NFL. This defense is coming to get that ball back.